polls and election projections in 1967. I was hired by CBS News to make election projections for them for the upcoming presidential election in 1968. We had been using samples of polling places and the vote returns in those polling places for a number of years. So that actually started in 1962, before my time. But in 1967, we developed exit polling also. We wanted analytic data about the election, and we also wanted to know something about what to expect when the vote returns and the sample precincts came in. Exit polls use the same sample of polling places as the vote returns, except in an exit poll, the results come from interviewing voters after they've cast their ballots. And one of the questions that is asked of these people is how they voted. The other method of making projections is getting the vote returns in the same precincts. I worked for CBS and then the first network consortium in the United States from 1967 through 1993. Since then, I've been doing elections in Russia, the Philippines, Mexico, and the one in Taiwan. Altogether, I would say I've made projections in at least 3,000 political contests for president, senate, governor, House of Representatives, referenda, and other things. I've now made my seventh mistake with the error in the Taiwan election. Most of the projections were right.
Out of about 3,000?
About 3,000. Well, the causes of mistaken projections vary. The very first mistake I made was a report of voting that was counted electronically, and the count was wrong in a number of precincts in the state of Oregon in 1976. Twice, once in 1988, and then again in the 2000 election in Florida. We have what we call outliers, just unusual sample results, even though there's nothing wrong with the sample. Once in Georgia in 1980. I don't believe we made a mistake, but it came out different than the official tally. I believe there was election fraud. The mistake in Taiwan came about because a lot of misreporting of the vote in the exit poll precincts. So the reasons are usually varied. There's no one single reason.
Like plus or minus, like within a certain range for that you say as your error rate for the exit poll?
Well, no, because that depends on a number of factors. It depends on the sample size. It depends on how well one election is correlated with a past election. You can't really cite one figure as the sampling error.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that in most cases you wouldn't make a projection on an election that was much closer than 53-47. You might even prefer something that was a little bit more of a margin. That's the reason we gather vote returns in the sample precincts. They are more useful for making precise estimates in close elections. Well, in the Taiwan election, we were going to do the sampling from information provided to us. We provided materials on training interviewers. We were going to make the projections on election night, and we were also going to produce analytic results. We received the exit poll reports the day. We made an estimate. The estimate was wrong. It showed a 53 to 47 margin. We overstated Lien by 53 to 47, and it looked like he was going to win the election. That was from the exit poll. The exit poll had 84 of the 150 polling places with errors of more than 10 points. The exit poll wasn't very good. The interviewing was not done carefully. It's hard to make an accurate projection with bad results. We were given data at midday and again right before the polls closed.
So twice. So
I believe it was twice during the day.
Oh, twice during the day and then once before they closed.
Pardon me?
Like 2 times during the day and one more time before it closed. Because
I'm trying to remember whether it was 2 times or 3 times
because Mr. Wong said it was 3 times total.
Well, then it was 3 times.
Oh, okay.
We would have gotten the first report in late morning. The second report maybe several hours before the polls closed, and the third report just before the polls closed.
Was there any trend in those 3 sets of data, and can you make any kind of conclusion from that?
Well, there was no trend in the data. The data gave us estimates that were fairly consistent throughout the day, and the margin was the 53-47 margin that we cited.
So that was consistent throughout the day?
Fairly consistent, yes. Well, first of all, it isn't so incorrect. I mean, 3 points on a number is not a mile off the result. The mistake probably was making a projection with that close an election from the exit poll. But it appeared that the exit poll, I mean, at that point we couldn't tell that the exit poll data was bad, but normally a 53-47 margin would indicate a close election, a reasonably close election. We might have expected the margin to hold up, and we didn't find that out till after the polls closed and we started getting vote reports.
You said it was the data was you said it was perfect because it was because it matched with the data from earlier in the day. And of course you didn't know the official results then, but I was wondering, did that happen or what?
Okay, I really don't remember that well what happened during the day. The intermediate reports of the results aren't very important to me because I don't take very seriously incomplete exit polls. An exit poll is only useful for forecasting an election when the survey is complete. Whatever happened during the day was just part of the processing of the exit poll.
Okay.
I wouldn't get much. I never have been much interested in what was happening during the day. Well, there's nothing to learn about the outcome of the election by looking at results through the morning. Different voters may vote at other times of the day, and you can't make a lot of sense out of early exit poll numbers. It's like looking at the score at a sporting event at halftime. It doesn't tell you who's going to win.
According to Mr. Wong, the survey data stopped at a little after 3 p.m. or a little later, but the voting was continued till 4:30 because they let the people who were still waiting in line go in and vote if they were already waiting. A critic could say that, oh, well, then the exit poll didn't cover the last hour of voting. Could that possibly, I mean, from your point of view, statistical standpoint, is that possibly significant?
I don't think it was significant, no. It was only a small part of the voting day. The history of most elections is exactly what happened in Taiwan, but I would be very surprised to find out that the results changed significantly because of the last hour which we weren't conducting interviews. I don't believe that's the reason. 84 of the 150 polling places were more than 10 points in error. The remaining polling places, 65 of them were within 10 points. We didn't hear from one of them. So we heard from 149 polling places.
Okay.
More of them had errors of 10 points or more than were within the 10-point margin.
So is the 65 stations that were less than 10 points, would you consider that to be reliable data?
The 65?
The 65, yeah. Is that?
I would have expected the 65 to be fairly reliable.
Okay.
I remember we're sampling voters as they leave. We're not interviewing everybody.
Yes.
So some variation in the vote should be reasonable. It could vary by the 10 points just due to sampling. But if there's no bias in the results, if there's no systematic error in the results, then you should get as many errors in that situation one way as the other. So within 10 points, I would expect them to give a fair picture of the outcome. Well, when I have 84 of the polling places with serious errors in them, it's kind of difficult to make a reliable estimate.
Okay.
I mean, the errors range above 10 points up to 83 points in one direction, and in the other direction, they ranged up to 48 errors, up to 48 percentage points. You can't make much of an estimate with data that's that far off.
A possible reason for the error rate is because the students were pushed back 30 meters rather than waiting outside of the voting station as they're supposed to. Like, if that happened in approximately 1/3 of the voting stations spread throughout the island, do you think that is a legitimate cause?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't be that far from the polling place and do a proper job of sampling. The interviewer is told to interview every third voter or every fifth voter as they emerge. If the interviewer is that far from the polling place, many of the voters can turn in the opposite direction and walk away. The interviewer wouldn't be able to interview the designated sample. What I don't know is how many of the interviewers started making substitutions when they were missing people because they were too far from the polling place. Now, the distance could have a great effect on what happened. I really didn't analyze it as to where it was coming from or other things. I've never seen this many precincts that were this far off in an exit poll. I mean, this is more precincts with misleading data than data that's useful. Whether the distance was the sole problem the interviewers were having or whether there were other problems, I don't know. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about the age of the interviewers or the training of the interviewers. I know what we said they should happen, but I don't know how well the interviewers understood their job or whether they did what they were instructed to do. And all those things can contribute to errors like this. It's sort of difficult to comment on something when so many of the precincts are so far off.
The voting rate?
No, we didn't try to confirm the turnout.
Okay.
We were looking for two things. One was a projection, and the second thing was an analysis of different voting groups and how people with different characteristics voted in this election.
how do you feel about possibly doing this for 2008?
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to do it sit here in New York. I would like to know a lot more about the training of the interviewers and the selection of the interviewers. You can't make reliable projections with interviewing, with data the way we got it, and it just won't work. I mean, I would do it in 2008, but in Taiwan, not from long distance. The other thing that would concern me was the willingness of TVBS to correct the record if the result is wrong. I'm just astonished that they would broadcast the correction. As I say, I've made other mistakes, and in every case, the mistake was recognized. I was the one that recognized the mistake, and the broadcasters corrected it. We didn't leave people with the impression that somebody was going to win that we thought wasn't. And I don't really know why. It must be a cultural difference between us. But when I knew the result was 50-50 from the vote returns, I thought surely they would broadcast this, and the fact that they didn't was very upsetting. Look, we agreed to collect both the exit poll and the vote returns. I mean, what was the point of collecting the vote returns if we weren't going to rely on them? We learned from the vote return of the sample precincts that the result was 50-50.
Okay, so he knew that was going to that you were going to need that, right?
Well, of course he knew it. He's the one that asked the interviewers to get it for us. We received the vote returns from the same people that sent us the exit poll. And we made a projection using the vote returns, and we tried to get TVBS to correct the record. Several days after the election, they wanted to publish the analysis of the election with the result 53-47 in it.
Uh-huh.
And it took a lot of talking, but I talked them out of it. I said, you can't do that. We all know the election was 50-50. Why are we publishing something that's 53-47? Well, the 50-50 in the model came from the vote returns in the sample, same precincts. There was no adjustment to I wouldn't describe it an adjustment. We just put the correct vote figures in the sample precincts. We took the bad data out, put good data in, and we got the right result. So there was nothing wrong with the sample.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right.
There was nothing wrong with the model. The trouble was with the exit poll numbers we got. Let me tell you my general feeling. I mean, I don't know anything about fraud in Taiwan or elsewhere. But I'm really not a big believer in conspiracies like this. And the reason I'm not a believer is it takes many people to commit such a fraud. And it also takes able people, and you have to be reasonably bright to pull off something like this. Now, while all of that is possible, it also stretches my belief or my credulity that you could find a large number of people to do something like this, and in all this time nobody has talked about it, so that it's managed to leak out to somebody in the press. And I just don't think conspiracies are possible that involve more than one person. I don't see how they do them and keep them secret.
Oh no, but because it's not really a secret. It's the.
You mean the people that have committed the fraud admitted to it?
No, they didn't admit to it, but there were several cases where they were seen doing it directly in front of the opposition monitors, and were simply had their authority overridden, said, no, we're not doing vote fraud. And because the person in charge of the voting station is supportive of the ruling party, the opposition people simply got overruled. The vote fraud was done right in front of them in many cases throughout the day, and testimonies were made right away the night of the election of vote fraud directly in front of opposition monitors. So the alleged vote fraud took place, was reported during the day, happening right in front of people and voters who reported it later. And secondly, vote counting, there were stories of all the people being pushed out of the voting station and the vote counting being done in secret when it's supposed to be done out in the open with everyone watching. And basically at that time, the people can throw in their stamped ballots, just like 100 at a time, like any number they want, just as long as they like sign it illegally in the voter list. And there are several. There's an entire book written about like all of these instances. So it's not a secret. It was you know.
The people have admitted to committing fraud.
Well, of course they haven't admitted to it, but it was. I don't want to give my personal interpretation too much, but basically I feel like the people in charge of the voting stations were under pressure to commit an X amount of vote fraud in certain voting stations because they would do it right, they would be caught and they would still do it, and that makes me feel like they were under some kind of political pressure. And another reason why it could have happened, and without them noticing, was because we had a referendum bound with the actual election, and they made the opposition monitors look at the referendum box instead of the election one. And vote fraud is a common. Well, people have different opinions about this, but it's common in Taiwan election history.
Look, I have no knowledge of any of this that I can. I don't know anything that I can use to help shed any light on the possibility of election fraud. I guess I can't really comment extensively.
I'm just wondering, from your point of view, like how can you tell if it's probable vote fraud, or is the data just bad? You know, like, or is there no way you can really tell?
I can't really tell.
Yeah.
I have no way to tell.
Okay.